We're going to welcome a special guest into the studio with us here. Hugo Valverde is here, an immigration attorney. Hugo, we greatly appreciate you coming and spending a little bit of time with us here today. Now, you're based out of Norfolk or Virginia Beach?
Virginia Beach.
Out of Virginia Beach. Okay, wonderful. How long have you been practicing in the area?
Over 20 years.
Okay, I didn't mean to do that to you. I didn't want to. I didn't want to make you reckon with the duration of your time here. But over 20 years, clearly a lot of experience as an immigration attorney. I'm wondering, over the course of that 20 years, have you seen a time where this topic is more thought about, talked about, and asked about than right now?
I have not.
Yeah.
This is an interesting time to be an immigration attorney. As you can imagine, there's a lot of changes in policies, a lot of changes in law as well. And so for an immigration attorney, you got to keep your eye on the ball.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of changes.
It constantly changing, and
Yes.
which would mean that your approach probably has to adjust as those things change. And not only is it constantly changing, but even with the changes, there are then challenges to those changes and appeals to those changes. It's such a winding road to come to a conclusion. I actually want to start with a piece of law that has not changed as of today, and that is the Supreme Court upholding birthright citizenship, upholding the 14th Amendment. When you saw that result, first thoughts?
Well, I wasn't necessarily surprised. As an attorney, you look at the Constitution, and the Constitution is it's like one of our foundational documents for our country. And the last time the Supreme Court spoke about this issue was like in the late 1800s, and it hasn't really been disturbed since then. And I didn't really see how, from a legal standpoint, it could be that decision was going to be reversed, but you never know. I did read most of the opinion since it came out, and what it did was it built off of that prior decision from the late 1800s. I would say it like affirmed, what they said back in the late 1800s, and without getting too much into the weeds, let's say, the 14th Amendment, it goes into a lot of the history, about the 14th Amendment and how, it was a post-Civil War constitutional amendment that was created because of a Supreme Court decision known as Dred Scott had said that a child of a slave is not a U.S. citizen of the United States. And so to correct that ruling, Congress got together and they wrote the 14th Amendment. What the 14th Amendment says is all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the U.S. The debate centers around, anytime this topic comes up and is debated, it centers around what does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean. Now, back in the earlier decision, known as Wong Kim Ark is the name, the Supreme Court looked at our history of our country. And going back to England, when the colonists came over here from England, they brought over a legal system with them known as the common law. And in England, the law was birthright citizenship. If someone was born in the territory of the King of England, he would be recognized as a citizen of England, subject to some narrow exceptions. And so that area of the common law, as it's known, was something that the drafters of the 14th Amendment referenced a lot. And so the Supreme Court in their most recent decision said, well, that's what they had in mind. The drafters of the 14th Amendment had in mind this common law principle. And so that's when you're interpreting that line of the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, what it means is that you're going to be a U.S. citizen unless you fall into one of the two narrow exceptions. And the first exception is if you're a child of a foreign dignitary like an ambassador. And the other exception is if you are the child of someone who is here, occupying the United States, like perhaps under a time of war. But unless you fall into one of those exceptions, you're going to be recognized as a citizen of the U.S.
So is this a situation where they are those who are fighting it to change the birthright citizenship. They're fighting to add more exceptions, essentially.
Yes, in a way, yeah, that's right, Connor. What they wanted to add was there's another requirement that, yeah, falls within the exception of domicile, that you have to be here more permanently. So what the executive order said, that gave rise to all this litigation, was that if someone was here, yeah, undocumented or maybe on a temporary visa, and if they had children, they were not going to be recognized as U.S. citizens, and so they wanted to add a domicile requirement to be read into the 14th Amendment. But the Supreme Court clearly said, in their opinion, just recently, that is not something that the drafters had in mind, when they wrote the 14th Amendment.
And when we look at a 6-3 decision, as you said, it was very clear, and every lower court that ruled on this ruled the same way,
Yes.
and determined to uphold that 14th Amendment as it is written. Do you expect this to now, following this decision, be something that comes up again more frequently, or is the strength of this decision enough to where this will be left as it is for now?
Yeah, I think it's gonna. I think when I read the opinion, it seemed to me that the Supreme Court was trying to settle the question once and for all. I would see it as a very difficult task to now come back and try to reinterpret that another way. What will be required if someone wants the 14th Amendment to be read that way is a constitutional amendment. Follow the procedures that are set forth in the Constitution. That's the way the 14th Amendment was drafted. If we want to change the 14th Amendment as a country, you need to do it through the proper channels, which is a constitutional amendment through Congress.
Okay, very good. Now, moving on to another major Supreme Court decision that came down regarding temporary protected status. The Supreme Court ruling that the executive branch, the office of the president, does in fact have the authority to terminate temporary protected status without any sort of judicial review or without any real balance of power within that decision. Again, I'll leave it broad for you. Your first thoughts when you saw that decision come down.
Well, of course, my first reaction is my heart goes out, to all the individuals from Haiti, who now they've been here for years. They're working, living and working in our country. That now all of a sudden their lives are going to be in limbo, so to speak. They're not going to have status. They're going to lose their employment authorization. And so my first reaction is I feel bad for all the individuals affected by the cancellation of a TPS. Now, again, from a legal standpoint, temporary protected status is something that is put within the discretion of the executive branch. In other words, the president and the agencies. And so from that standpoint, the courts historically have been very reluctant to impose themselves when discretion is provided to the executive branch on matters of immigration. And so from that standpoint, it wasn't necessarily surprising that the court came out the way they did. But again, from my heart just goes out, to those individuals that now are left to deal with this situation now where their lives are upended because they don't have status anymore.
And when it comes to the legal processes, when you have a situation where you specifically mentioned Haitians, temporary protected status for Haiti is one of those that is being removed. We also know that over the course of this second term, President Trump has been very vocal in his opposition to the Haitian community here in the United States. How much of a factor are those comments over the course of the last year and a half in making a decision like this? Or is it something that has no bearing on legal framework?
Well, it could inform perhaps the motivation maybe behind some of the cancellations for temporary protected status. But when the court is reviewing like a cancellation, that is really irrelevant for the court. So it's just it's really, the court does leave a lot of it up to the executive branch, and they try not to impose themselves on those issues. Although, again, from a human standpoint, your heart goes out to the individuals that are affected, by these decisions by the executive branch. And the criticism that was being made, with these cancellations, is that usually when the country cancels a temporary protected status, it's because the conditions have improved, perhaps, in the home country. But in a lot of these cancellations that we've seen of temporary protected status, the conditions in the countries haven't really improved. Like, for example, the conditions in Haiti have not really improved. Venezuela, another one. Conditions in Venezuela have not really improved. And so even though maybe the executive branch has the discretion to terminate temporary protected status, it just doesn't make sense. So,
is there some sort of, and it sounds like the answer is no based on what we've talked about so far, but is there some sort of legal burden of proof for removing those protections when it comes to the safety of the nation?
There is a evidentiary burden, but it's very low for the government. They just have to provide a reasonable explanation, basically, some valid governmental interest, that motivated the action. And at least in matters of immigration, the courts, again, are just very differential to the executive branch.
Like you said, for the individuals who will be affected by this ruling, are there avenues of legal resource, avenues of legal relief in order to try and help?
Potentially, maybe. It's going to be, very case by case. But I would say in the majority of cases, there probably will not be, many options.
Okay. So, as you said, thoughts with families who have built lives here, and now
Yes.
those lives are certainly under duress due to this ruling. I wanted to ask about a ruling that came down here in Virginia not long ago, or at least that we've been seeing reports of here, which is a judge ruling against what was to be a new Virginia law that was preventing the wearing of face masks for immigration authorities. A judge ruling against that. We know that face masks and face coverings for immigration authorities all the way up to Congress and the federal government has been a major talking point and a point of consternation, especially between Democrats and Republicans, as far as legality goes. Is that something that you consider to be an approachable topic, to create a rule where face covering is not allowed, is prohibited?
Yes. There very well could be situations where a face covering, for reasons of security, makes sense. Although, when the government is thinking about the relationship between law enforcement and the community, the public, having an officer wear a face mask, that also acts as an obstacle to, in a way, not only, to recognize the officer, but also it can almost serve as a obstacle to develop a relationship, with the community that the law enforcement serves. So I think it's a matter of policy, and I'm not going to say that it should be ruled out in all cases, but it's something that, as a country, we need to think about and just maybe wrestle with a little bit, and determine what's the best situations for face masks to be used.
I certainly remember, especially in late 2020 and into 2021, we did story after story after story of police departments attempting to create those relationships and having very specific initiatives to go into communities and develop real and genuine trust. So it speaks to what you were talking about, where you wouldn't want anything that could prevent that, especially in community policing.
Right.
So that it did make me think of that. We got that news just before we came in for the stream. I want to ask as well about a topic that I'm not particularly well schooled in terms of where it stands right now. DACA protections, or DACA protections. This is defense action for childhood arrivals. Young immigrants who grew up in the United States can seek temporary protection from deportation. Where does that program stand? Is it still in action, and is it under threat?
It's under threat. It's right now it's in sort of a legal limbo. Um, what we're seeing right now is the government is accepting renewals. So individuals that already had DACA, they can renew them. Although, and they're not accepting new applications for DACA. But the issue we're seeing right now with the DACA renewals is that normally when somebody is renewing their DACA, they receive their new renewal, their new work authorization within a matter of months. Right now, we're seeing a lot of individuals, they've been waiting well over a year and a half, and at the same time, so the government has slowed down on the renewals of those applications, and at the same time, the government stopped providing automatic extensions for the work permits while the permits were being renewed. And so what that has caused, we've had several clients contact us that for help because they've lost their jobs. Because their permits are expired and their new one hasn't come in yet because of government delay, they're being dismissed, from their place of employment, and it's creating a lot of hardship for a lot of the individuals who have DACA.
Still provides a legal framework through which to try and give protection.
It does provide some, although DACA is not a formal legal status. It's more of an accommodation. So the DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and so deferred action, think about what that means. They could take action on you, the government could take an enforcement action against you, but they're deferring from taking that action, usually for humanitarian reasons. It's not a formal lawful status, which makes it very tenuous, for someone who's a DACA holder. And ideally, what's needed is Congress to pass the DREAM Act, something that's been around for many years, which would provide individuals who qualify for DACA with a pathway to permanent residence and eventual citizenship.
I also want to ask about detainment centers.
Mm-hmm.
I want to actually start with something we've seen a couple times here on our program that we've covered, which is elected officials attempting to access detainment centers in their city or their state, oftentimes due to reports of mistreatment, wanting to see for themselves, if you will. Mm-hmm. What legal recourse do elected officials have to enter immigration detainment facilities just on their own volition?
I'm not familiar with the laws on that. I know here in Virginia, we haven't really seen some of those issues that we've seen in other parts of the country with elected officials trying to access detention centers and then ending up being arrested. But I'm not exactly familiar with all the laws on that. It's unfortunate, that an elected official is being arrested when they're trying to visit a facility that's within their jurisdiction, in the area which they represent. And as an elected representative, perhaps they should have the ability to do that unfettered.
And we've seen multiple reports of mistreatment within detainment facilities. Mm-hmm. How difficult is it to enforce some of those rights in these types of facilities in particular? How does it maybe differ from a jail or a prison?
Yes, so the detention centers compared to, say, a prison, prison is punitive. It's to punish someone for committing a crime. A detention center, the purpose of it is not to punish, it's more to hold someone for the purpose of removing them. So the purposes are different. And so because the purposes are different, in an immigration detention center, usually the detainees will have more privileges to be, out, privileges to watch TV. So that's how they defer. Now, another reason why they defer is that being here in the country unlawfully is not a criminal offense. It's a civil offense. So because it's not a crime, again, the purpose is not to punish someone. The purpose is just to make sure that they're held so that they can be removed from the United States.
And is that something where, I guess maybe I'll say, what would be your advice to someone who has had a family who has been detained and who they have not been able to reach, perhaps?
Yes, they should contact an attorney. An immigration attorney can help, get more information about the detainee, contact the detention center, contact ICE officials, and get more information to see if the situation can be addressed. Now, if that fails, of course, one can look at possibly taking legal action. Now, taking legal action against the government is not easy, but it's still a possibility, a possible option. And so as a last recourse, that's something that someone could pursue.
And, I did want to ask as well, so many of the topics that I've brought up today are the ones that do get the headlines, and
Sure.
They are big, important topics. I'm wondering, within this process, within the work that you do, is there anything that maybe we've been missing? Are there any major issues or topics that we don't see that are causing major consequences?
There's a lot, a lot going on right now, and all different. It's not just with illegal immigration, persons who are here undocumented. There's a lot of things the government is doing to make it harder for people to do things the right way, to do it through legal venues. So, for example, for an H-1B visa, the government wanted to impose an extra $100,000 payment. If someone wanted to get a H-1B visa, to come here and work in the U.S. Recently, they announced a policy if someone wants to apply for permanent residence here in the U.S., that they're going to be more restrictive and require the person to return to their home country. And what doesn't come out in that discussion is that in most of those cases, those people are not going to be able to return because they're going to incur what's called a 10-year bar from being able to come back. And so there's that. There's all kinds of changes happening with asylum law policies. And so someone is here because they fear going back to their home country, they fear persecution. The policies are becoming very restrictive. That it's making it very difficult to have that asylum granted. There's some groups that study the statistics in the court and the approval rates, the grant rates, and there was one group that looked at the data, and whereas before, on average in the country, 70% or so of asylum cases were denied, 30% was approved. Now the denial rate has increased to over 90%. So again, it's just the government is not just addressing illegal immigration, but they're also making it harder for people to do things the right way and take legal measures that are available to them or that were available to them. Now they're making it harder.
It's a tough sentence to hear, preventing people from doing things the right way.
Yes, and that's what, so the government's done a great job of controlling the border, right? We really don't hear much about the border right now. And that's, all credit to them, to the government for controlling the border. But now they're focused on the interior. And we're seeing and legal immigration. And so, again, my life as an immigration attorney right now is very, very challenging.
I bet, and very busy. Indeed.
Very busy, very challenging. Yes, It's not for the faint of heart right now.
No, most definitely not, which makes us even more appreciative of you taking a little bit of time to sit with us and talk to us about this. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go?
Well, what I would say is however you fall on this issue with immigration is maybe get to know some immigrants in our community, and I think what you'll see is that these individuals are hardworking. They're trying to make an honest living, and they are realizing the American dream. The American dream is still alive and well, I believe, because I see it in my clients every day.
Well, we really appreciate having you here, Hugo Valverde, an immigration attorney, spending some time with us today. Frankly, we took too much of your time, so we appreciate your patience, and hopefully we can catch up with you again later
absolutely.
down the road. As you said, there are constantly new developments on this topic, so we hope to see you again.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to Hugo for sitting down with us here on Live Impact News, a special opportunity for us to give more insight and more depth to the issues that we've been reporting on all week here and really for years and years.